It's time for the France 24 debate. Perfectly justified. The British government's defending the detention of a journalist's partner for 9 hours last Sunday at Heathrow Airport. Perfectly justified if there's a suspicion of passengers carrying, quote, highly sensitive stolen information that would help terrorism. David Miranda was said to be acting as courier for information U.S. intelligence whistleblower Edward Snowden gave to Glenn Greenwald, based in Rio, and documentary filmmaker Laura Poitras, who's working out of Germany. So, complicity to treason or a case of shoot the messenger? The latest twist in the Snowden saga draws sudden attention to both the UK's stake in his standoff with US authorities and to the broader argument over whether authorities are abusing anti-terror laws to snoop, more specifically to cyber snoop on, well, basically anyone who owns a cell phone around the world. Today in the France 24 debate, Snowden's secrets, now it's London calling. With us to talk about it from the UK capital, Labour Member of Parliament, Jeremy Corbyn. Welcome back to the France 24 debate. We welcome from Washington, journalist and security affairs columnist Joshua Faust. Thank you for being with us. Here in the studio, Francis Perrin of the French chapter of Amnesty International. We have with us, he writes for the French news weekly Le Point and as a contributor to the Tech 24 show here on France 24, Guillaume Gralet. And also with us, Ellen Wasselina of the Observatory of the Black Gulf and Mediterranean Seas. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, where our hashtag is F24debate. Now, just to fill you in, David Miranda may be suing, but his 9 hours of questioning, well, that's the legal limit under the UK's 2000 Terrorism Act. More on this from Stephen Carroll.
He spent 9 hours being questioned in the transit area of Heathrow Airport, treated as a terror suspect. David Miranda was carrying material for his partner Glenn Greenwald, the Guardian journalist who first published information provided by the whistleblower Edward Snowden. Miranda was travelling through London from Berlin, where he was stopped under a provision of the UK's Terrorism Act.
They spoke to me, asking questions about my whole life. They took my computer, my game console, cell phone, everything.
Mr. Miranda's lawyers have now written to the British authorities threatening legal action over what they say was his unlawful detention and confiscation of his possessions. The Guardian says it's supporting his action.
He wants that material back, and he doesn't want it copied. And if the British state, in whatever form, we're not quite sure which bit of the British state we're dealing with, wants to get that material, then I think they have to do it through a more satisfactory procedure.
The UK government says the police did act legally, but Britain's terrorism law watchdog is reviewing the case, which he's described as extremely unusual.
The only purpose you're supposed to use this power for is to determine whether the person you're talking to is a terrorist. So that's a fairly narrow power. Now, of course, it's used for, it can have incidental benefits. It can bring useful intelligence into the hands of the police and the intelligence agencies. But it's only supposed to be used for that one purpose, and it's important to ensure that it's not used illegally.
The Guardian has also revealed that it was forced to destroy a copy of the Snowden files in its London office after being threatened with legal action by the British government if it didn't hand the information over.
And we'll talk about more on that in a minute. First, though, Jeremy Corbyn, this reaction from Prime Minister Cameron's office saying it had been kept abreast of the operation but was not involved in the decision to stop Miranda. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very strange decision for the Prime Minister to announce that he was kept abreast but didn't authorise it. Clearly, to detain someone for 9 hours and then let them go must have come from somewhere on high, either from US intelligence or from somewhere else, or they had already got files on David Miranda and they were looking for him when he came through Heathrow. The interesting thing is, of course, that he was not stopped on leaving Germany, but was stopped in transit at Heathrow, which is a bit of a deterrent to anyone travelling through Heathrow, I would have thought.
You say on orders from the US. What do you mean by that?
Well, either the British Home Secretary instructed the for the security service to question David Miranda when he was travelling through Heathrow, or the US, which has access to the travel data on just about every airline, particularly ones exiting Europe and entering the USA, may well have contacted the British and said, we want you to stop him, see what he's got on him, and possibly take that information from him. And so I think we need to be told exactly what the chain of command was that made this decision. To David Cameron to have been kept informed of it, surely if he was told straight away that Mr. Miranda had been stopped, then he should have intervened and said why, on what powers has he been stopped, and who asked us to do it. And I think Mr. Cameron has therefore moved himself into the frame and must answer questions on it.
Joshua Faust, the White House has already said that they didn't give any orders or make any requests. They did say that they were kept abreast as well of what happened. Is that credible?
I mean, it's certainly possible. The Home Secretary made similar comments that the police at Heathrow informed them that they were going to be making this detention, but that the higher authorities had no role to play. I mean, it's fair as far as it goes to speculate about how close the collaboration between American and British intelligence actually goes, because they do work together on a lot of issues. But right now, there's no evidence. There's nothing actually linking, especially the White House, much less any higher authorities in the UK, to this detention. And I think as long as we keep it as labeled as speculation, which is what it is, it's fine to talk about and wonder, but there's no data to support that, like, President Obama ordered David Miranda to be held for 9 hours. It just doesn't exist.
Ellen Wassilino, was the 9 hours justified?
Again, I'll go back to what my colleague said. We're speculating here. We don't have all the information. What did they find? Was he indeed a carrier? And by the way, his travel was paid for by The Guardian. So is he then implied to be involved in Mr. Greenwald's work, which we know has been linked to Mr. Snowden? It's interesting to see the provisions, too, of this Terrorism Act 2000 and how the US and the UK and Europe have come together on certain issues of terrorism, protecting national security. So is this a national, we're going back to the same issue as I've said before, this is a national security issue. Can it be justified? Was 9 hours too much? And as Theresa May said, maybe we should bring it down to 6 hours. Confiscating material and then not charging, again, we're going to the fine line between democracy and national security, I think.
All right, so maybe not. Francis Perrin?
I think we must be very frank about this. We are speaking about Schedule 7 of UK Terrorism Act of 2000. Nobody can seriously think that this person, Mr. Miranda, did present any threat as far as terrorism is concerned to the UK government or any other government. What we did witness was clearly some tactics of harassment. And this law of this Act of 2000 is a bad law, very vague. Amnesty International and other, of course, NGOs and other persons at this point, at the very beginning, it's a bad law and it has been badly used for, I would say, petty revenge. So let us be very clear about what is happening now. And I think it's not a good thing for the UK's reputation, especially when this government and the US government says, well, freedom of expression, human rights, it's very important, but abroad. I don't think that it will help their reputation and credibility at the end of the day.
All right, so you're calling this tactics of harassment. The UK's Justice Minister, well, he doesn't see it that way. Damien Green believes police have every right to find out, in this instance, what David Miranda was carrying.
The Metropolitan Police were acting as they do under the law, that the law is there to protect us from anything that will increase the danger of terrorism. And because these powers are extensive, we have an independent investigator. He is talking to the Metropolitan Police later today, and I suggest we all wait and see what he has to say. So you are concerned?
All right, he's talking to that independent investigator. Is there? So there are checks and balances, he seems to be saying, Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, let's just unravel this thing a little bit. Snowden is in Russia and on a one-year asylum visa of some sort. A journalist in Brazil's partner is travelling from the home of a documentary filmmaker in Germany to Brazil, neither in Russia nor in the USA, transiting through Heathrow, not attempting to enter the UK, and is miraculously detained under Britain's security laws, terrorism laws, for the maximum period of 9 hours. And many people expressed a lot of concern about this, not least the employers of his partner, the Guardian newspaper, also Amnesty International, and even David Anderson, QC, who's the government's own advisor on the Operation Security laws, expressed concern about it. I think we need to know who ordered this questioning to go on, because it wasn't a random check. It wasn't a random stopping of one person travelling through transit. They clearly were looking out for him and had been tipped off by somebody that he may know something about the Snowden case. It looks to me like systematic harassment of anybody that is seen to be either trying to investigate the Snowden case or indeed declare their support for Snowden in what I believe was actually a very brave thing that he did. And it's obviously cost him a great deal in terms of personal liberty and circumstances.
All right. Whether or not it's a brave thing that he did, we'll pick up on that point in a moment. But Guillaume Gralet, as Jeremy Corbyn was saying, this Snowden case is no ordinary case. And people who don't really follow this very closely, they sort of lump this together with the WikiLeaks and everything. This is a very different case, isn't it, this PRISM scandal?
Yeah, we have the feeling we don't know where it's going to stop. Let's be clear, everyone is against terrorism, of course, for sure.
Why are they so riled? Why is the UK and the US so riled?
I think it's a bit strange, and we have the feeling of harassment, of course, and I have the feeling, speaking about the digital aspect of it, that the seizure, for example, of Miranda's laptop, his phone, his hard drives, it shows that the GCHQ, the security forces, do not really understand the digital age where we live now. And we have the same feeling when we experience where we know what happened at the Guardian's office, as Alan Rusbridger, the editor, just described it, because this will not impeach people to speak, to write in a secure way. There are tons of VPNs, software, traffic obfuscation, Jabber, Tux, lots of new software. And you have the feeling today that all the people want their freedom of speech.
All right, and you mentioned what the editor of The Guardian was saying. He penned an article about it. He calls it one of the strangest moments in his paper's history, the recent day when unnamed government officials came in and ordered the destruction of Snowden documents.
We had to destroy it or give it back to them. What they really wanted was for us to give it back to them. And I explained that there were other copies, not within the UK, and so I couldn't really see the point of destroying one copy. But because we had other copies, I was happy to destroy a copy in London, if that was going to satisfy them.
Joshua Faust, he calls that a pointless piece of symbolism from officials that understood nothing about the digital age. Do you get the sense on both sides of the Atlantic that perhaps people are a little bit overwhelmed by what's going on?
I think overwhelming is definitely a good way to say this. It's also important, I think, to note that both sides in this scandal are very fond of either overstating or omitting key details of what's happening. Mr. Rusbridger was open about the fact that he destroyed those hard drives to avoid messy and potentially drawn-out lawsuit with the British government as they sued to get those documents back, to get that hard drive back. That wasn't in the initial version of the story. Just like with Mr. Miranda, when he was initially detained at the airport, the initial version of events, as reported by The Guardian, didn't mention the fact that they were funding his airport travel, that he was serving essentially as a document mule, transporting these files back and forth between two of the reporters abroad. I mean, a lot of these details that come out, I think, dramatically change our understanding of what's happening, and it's incredibly difficult to keep up with it. From the other side, the government, I don't think, has been upfront about why Miranda was held for 9 hours. If all they wanted to do was get his documents, get his hard drive, essentially, there's no need to hold him for 9 hours. From the other side of it, from the American perspective, if they really wanted to be addressing this, They wouldn't be going after, say, journalists. They wouldn't be pursuing, like, the president of Bolivia and forcing his plane down. They would be quietly working with the Russians to arrange an exchange of him. So both sides in this, I think, are both highly emotional and overreacting left and right, and it's making it incredibly difficult to figure out what the reality is.
All right, and on Twitter, we have Wotatic saying Dave Miranda was working as a document mule. If so, his arrest isn't simply an abuse of anti-terror law, but an attack on press freedom, which brings us back to the point, Ellen Wassilina, that Jeremy Corbyn made, which is that he thinks that Edward Snowden, what he did was a very brave thing. Do you agree?
No, I don't. And I don't think of a lot of Americans. I remember I gave you the figures the last time we talked about this subject about releasing documents that were top secret, comes back to the point of our national security. And our national security is not only U.S. national security, it's also UK national security, it's also EU national security. In this day and age where we're seeing a lot of fighting going on, terrorists, jihadists in Syria, for example, there are ways to prevent that if we have the information and can do that. This is, I think, excuse me to say this, but this is just a sort of a diversion, or like you well said, harassment. This is not the main point. The main point is to be able to prevent terrorist attacks, and we are going to see more of them as we see immigration rise through the Mediterranean, be it on the east or in the center. You're going to see Egypt now overflow. We have even heard today about the jihadists trying to move or going to move from the fighting areas into Europe and are going to attack Europeans. So, excuse me to say this, but this is, a minor incident. I think what the message is sending is that Mr. Snowden had documents, is in violation, he stole documents, he's transformed documents, and he's wanted for espionage. Now that this person is traveling or working with Mr. Greenwald, and as was just said, he's the information mule, clearly he was being harassed for doing so. So, in other words, there's still this issue out there, and I'll go back to your point, too. You're right, the law hasn't kept up, and I've said this before, the law has not kept up with our way of doing business and our way of communicating.
All right. Whether or not this issue, whether or not the Snowden affair is you were putting it, a diversion is a point I want to pick up with the rest of the panel when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.